Somewhere inside your house right now, there's a room that's quietly costing you hundreds of dollars every single summer. You know exactly which one I'm talking about. By the middle of the afternoon, your air conditioner has been running for hours, but that room still refuses to cool down. The thermostat keeps dropping, your electric bill keeps climbing, and somehow the heat always wins. Most people believe that's simply the price of staying comfortable. I used to believe the same thing. But a few months ago, while researching ancient Roman architecture, I discovered something that completely changed the way I look at summer heat. The Romans were cooling their homes nearly 2,000 years ago without electricity, without air conditioners, and without spending thousands of dollars every year. The strange part wasn't that these methods existed. It was that I had seen one of them my entire childhood without ever realizing where it came from. Every July, my grandmother would soak an old cotton sheet in a bucket of water, wring it out with her hands, and hang it across the kitchen window. She never explained the science behind it. She'd simply smile and say, "People knew how to stay cool long before they started buying cold air." As a child, I thought it was just another old family habit. Years later, I discovered the Romans had been using almost the exact same principle centuries before modern air conditioning ever existed. That discovery sent me down a rabbit hole I never expected. I spent weeks reading Roman building manuals, archaeological studies, and modern engineering research, then decided to test 6 forgotten Roman cooling methods inside my own house using nothing more than a digital thermometer and everyday materials. Some barely worked. Some completely surprised me. And one simple trick lowered the temperature so much that I climbed back up with a second thermometer because I honestly thought the first one had to be broken. By the end of this video, you'll know all 6 Roman cooling methods, exactly how much each one changed the temperature, which climates they actually work in, and why one forgotten design could save you thousands of dollars every summer. But before we get to the trick that shocked me the most, we have to start with the simplest Roman cooling method of them all, one that costs less than a cup of coffee and was hiding in my grandmother's kitchen the entire time. The first Roman cooling method takes us to one of the most famous buildings ever constructed, the Colosseum. Most people know it as a giant arena where gladiators fought before nearly 50,000 spectators under the blazing Mediterranean sun. But almost nobody notices what was stretched high above those crowds. Roman engineers built an enormous linen canopy called the velarium, operated by trained sailors who adjusted it throughout the day as the sun moved across the sky. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a massive shade. Then I found something that made me stop reading and go back to the beginning. Several ancient accounts describe workers soaking sections of that heavy linen with water during the hottest days. That sounded completely ridiculous to me. Why would anyone make thousands of pounds of fabric even heavier in the middle of summer? The answer turned out to be surprisingly simple. As hot air passed through the damp linen, the water slowly evaporated, pulling heat out of the air before it reached the people below. Without knowing the modern term evaporative cooling, Roman engineers had accidentally built one of the largest natural cooling systems in history. The moment I read that, I couldn't stop thinking about my grandmother standing at her kitchen sink every July with that old cotton sheet in her hands. Suddenly, what had always looked like an old family tradition started looking like 2,000-year-old engineering. I had to know if this ancient trick still worked today. So the very next afternoon, I recreated it on the hottest window in my house. And when I came back 45 minutes later to check the thermometer, I honestly thought something had gone wrong. The next day turned out to be perfect for the test. By early afternoon, the outside temperature had climbed above 90 degrees, and the west-facing room in my house had become almost unbearable. The same room that always seemed impossible to cool, no matter how long the air conditioner ran. I took an old cotton bedsheet, soaked it in a bucket of water, wrung it out until it was damp instead of dripping, and hung it across the outside of the open window, exactly as my grandmother used to do. Then I cracked another window on the opposite side of the house to create a gentle cross breeze, just as Roman builders designed their homes to let air flow naturally. Before I walked away, I placed a digital thermometer on the windowsill. It read 91 degrees. I even took a photo of the display because I wanted proof in case the result seemed too unbelievable later. 45 minutes passed. When I came back, the first thing I noticed wasn't the thermometer, it was the room itself. The heavy, suffocating heat was gone. The air moving through the damp cloth felt softer, cooler, almost as if a fan had been switched on somewhere without making a sound. Then I looked at the thermometer. 79 degrees. I stared at it for several seconds before picking it up. A 12-degree drop, from nothing more than a wet cotton sheet and moving air. I checked the batteries. I checked the settings. I even compared it with another thermometer because I honestly thought the first one had to be wrong. But it wasn't. My grandmother had been using the same cooling principle that Roman engineers understood 2,000 years ago, and somehow we had almost forgotten it. But as impressive as that result was, it wasn't even the most surprising experiment. The very next Roman technique required nothing more than a simple bowl of water, and somehow, it managed to cool the room again. That first experiment left me wondering how many other old family habits had been hiding real science all along. Then another memory came back to me. Every summer, my grandmother kept a wide stone bowl filled with water just outside the kitchen door. It wasn't there for washing vegetables, and nobody ever drank from it. Every afternoon, she'd quietly refill it, and somehow that little corner of the house always felt cooler than the rest of the yard. I never questioned it. Years later, while studying Roman homes buried beneath the ash of Pompeii, I saw almost the exact same idea built into their houses. Wealthy Roman families designed their homes around an open courtyard called an atrium, and right in the center sat a shallow pool known as the impluvium. The roof above that courtyard was left open to the sky, which meant hot air could rise and escape freely, constantly pulling fresh air in through the house's doorways and hallways. Most history books say the pool existed simply to collect rainwater, but modern architects now believe it served another purpose as well. As natural cross breeze drifted across the surface of the water, tiny amounts evaporated into the air, quietly pulling heat away before that air moved through the surrounding rooms. Once again, the Romans were cooling their homes without machines, using nothing more than water, an open roof, and the natural movement of air. I couldn't build an entire Roman courtyard in my backyard, but I could recreate the same principle on a much smaller scale, and using the same rule the Romans did. No machines, just moving air. I grabbed the cheapest plastic basin I could find, filled it with cold water, and set it just inside my open window, in the direct path of the breeze. Then, exactly like the wet sheet test, I opened a window on the opposite side of the house so air would naturally pull through the room and pass over the water on its way through, instead of just sitting still in the heat. I honestly expected a tiny improvement, maybe 1 or 2 degrees if I was lucky. But 20 minutes later, the thermometer gave me another number I wasn't expecting, and it made me realize the Romans understood something about moving air that most modern houses have completely forgotten. The next afternoon, I set everything up exactly the way I had planned. The plastic basin sat just inside the open window, filled with cold water, positioned so the natural cross breeze from the window behind it would pass directly over the surface. No fan, no motor, just the same open window airflow that cooled the wet sheet in the first experiment. Before opening the second window, the thermometer beside the basin read 88 degrees. 20 minutes after I opened it and let the natural draft move through, I walked back expecting almost no difference. Instead, the display read 81 degrees. A 7-degree drop, powered by nothing but moving air. Not as dramatic as the wet sheet, but still far more than I expected from something that cost only a couple of dollars and used zero electricity. What surprised me even more was how the room felt. The air wasn't just cooler. It felt calmer, less dry, and far more comfortable than before. Modern engineers call this evaporative cooling, but the Romans didn't need scientific terms to understand it. They simply noticed that moving air became cooler when it passed over water and designed entire homes around that idea, with the wind doing all the work a fan would do today. At this point, 2 Roman methods had already worked inside my own house, and neither one required expensive equipment, a monthly electric bill, or even a single watt of electricity to run. And that's what actually bothered me. Because if a $3 sheet and a $2 basin can measurably drop a room's temperature without plugging anything in, why isn't either one mentioned anywhere in a modern home cooling guide? I don't think anyone is hiding this on purpose, not in some dramatic sense. It's simpler than that, and honestly a little more frustrating. Air conditioning is a business built on repeat purchases. You buy the unit once, then you pay for the electricity every single month, then the repair, then the replacement in 10 years. A basin of water doesn't fit anywhere into that business model, because you buy it once and it just keeps working. Nobody funds research into it. Nobody advertises it. So it quietly disappeared from anything written about home cooling in the last 50 years, not banned, just never worth mentioning to anyone selling you a machine. That's when I started asking myself a different question. What if the Romans weren't trying to cool their homes at all? What if they were preventing the heat from getting inside in the first place? That question led me to the third Roman technique, and unlike the first two, it had nothing to do with water. It was all about stopping the afternoon sun before it could ever reach the walls of your house. And once I tested it, I realized modern homes spend thousands of dollars removing heat that the Romans simply refused to let inside in the first place. By now, something had become impossible to ignore. Neither of the first two Roman methods actually created cold air. They simply made the air feel cooler before it entered the house. That made me wonder if the Romans had discovered an even smarter idea. What if the real secret wasn't cooling a hot room, but stopping the room from becoming hot in the first place? As soon as I started reading about Roman homes again, I realized that's exactly how they thought. Wealthy Roman houses weren't built with thin walls and giant sun-facing windows like many modern homes. They used thick stone walls, deep covered walkways, wooden shutters, and carefully planned courtyards that blocked the harsh afternoon sun long before it could heat the inside of the building. Roman architect Vitruvius even wrote that a well-designed house should work with the movement of the sun, not against it. Instead of waiting for rooms to overheat and then trying to cool them down, the Romans focused on preventing that heat from entering in the first place. The more I read, the more I realized something uncomfortable. Almost every modern cooling system waits until your house has already become an oven, then spends electricity trying to remove the heat. The Romans did the opposite. They stopped most of that heat at the door. It sounded almost too simple to make a noticeable difference today, but I wanted to find out. So I found the hottest wall in my house, spent just a few dollars on one simple item, and tested whether a 2,000-year-old Roman idea could still beat the afternoon sun. The results were much bigger than I expected. Trick 3. Block the sun before it enters. The experiment was almost embarrassingly simple. Instead of trying to cool the room after it became hot, I decided to stop the afternoon sun from heating it in the first place. I found a heavy light-colored curtain at a thrift store, closed it over the hottest west-facing window just before noon, and left everything else exactly the same. The next 3 afternoons, I measured the temperature at the same time using the same thermometer. The room stayed 5 degrees cooler than it had the week before. 5 degrees may not sound dramatic, but here's what surprised me. The air conditioner barely had to work during the hottest part of the day. The room never reached that unbearable afternoon heat because most of the sun's energy never made it inside. That's when I finally understood the difference between modern cooling and Roman cooling. Modern homes wait until the heat is already trapped indoors, then spend electricity trying to remove it. Roman builders solved the problem hours earlier by preventing that heat from entering in the first place. It was a completely different way of thinking, and once I noticed it, I started seeing the same philosophy everywhere. The walls, the windows, the courtyards, even the roofs were designed to work with nature instead of fighting it. And that led me to the final 3 Roman techniques, one of which completely changed the temperature inside my attic. By this point, I wasn't just testing old Roman ideas anymore. I was starting to notice a pattern. Every trick that worked had one thing in common. None of them were trying to make cold air. They were simply stopping heat from becoming trapped inside the house. That sounds obvious now, but modern homes usually do the opposite. We let the house bake all afternoon, then ask an air conditioner to fight a battle that's already been lost. Trick 4. Face the cool side. The Romans thought differently. One architect named Vitruvius wrote that the coolest rooms in summer were always the ones facing north because they avoided the harsh afternoon sun. It sounded almost too simple to test, so I did. Around 4 o'clock, I placed my thermometer in 2 rooms of my house. Same size, same ceiling height, same windows. The only difference was direction. The south-facing room reached 88 degrees. The north-facing room never climbed above 79. 9 degrees cooler, simply because it wasn't staring directly into the afternoon sun. Suddenly, my grandfather's habit made sense. Every summer after lunch, he'd move his chair from the sunny porch to the shaded side of the house. I always thought he was just looking for a nicer view. Turns out he was following the exact same rule Roman builders had written down nearly 2,000 years earlier. Trick 5. The covered walkway. But the Romans didn't stop with choosing the right room. Wealthier families built something called a cryptoporticus, a long, partially underground corridor where the earth itself kept the air cool. It wasn't powered by anything. The ground simply stayed at a stable temperature while the summer sun roasted everything above it. I don't own an ancient Roman villa, but I do have an interior hallway with no windows sitting near the center of my house. On the same 90-degree afternoon, I carried my thermometer in there just to satisfy my curiosity. It settled at 73 degrees. I didn't add a fan. I didn't switch on the air conditioner. I didn't do anything at all. The coolest place in my entire house was the room sunlight couldn't reach. That's when I realized something most of us never think about. Sometimes the cheapest cooling system isn't a device you buy. It's simply understanding which parts of your own house nature has already been cooling for free. By now, 5 Roman techniques had worked far better than I expected. The wet sheet, the bowl of water, blocking the afternoon sun before it entered the house, choosing the coolest rooms instead of the hottest ones, even letting the earth itself do part of the cooling. But one question still bothered me. If heat always rises, where does it actually go once it reaches the top of the house? Trick 6. The roof tile gap. That's when I climbed into my attic. It was one of the hottest afternoons of the summer, and within seconds it felt like opening an oven. My thermometer settled at 131 degrees. Then I noticed something almost embarrassing. One of the gable vents, the opening designed to let hot air escape, was nearly blocked by old insulation, dust, and years of debris. I spent about 15 minutes clearing it out by hand, covered the opening with a $3 piece of aluminum mesh to keep insects out, and climbed back down. The next afternoon, under almost identical weather, I returned with the same thermometer. This time it read 112 degrees. 19 degrees cooler, from nothing more than letting trapped heat escape the way it was always supposed to. The more I looked into Roman construction, the less surprising that result became. Roman roofs weren't simply rows of clay tiles. They were built using flat tegulae covered by curved embrices, creating tiny air channels beneath the roof. As the sun heated the tiles, hot air naturally rose through those channels and escaped before it could cook the rooms below. Modern engineers call it passive roof ventilation. The Romans simply called it good construction. 2,000 years later, the physics hasn't changed at all. Hot air still rises. Airflow still carries heat away. Most of us have simply stopped paying attention to it. Once I added everything up, the numbers actually stopped me for a second. All 6 of these tricks combined, the sheet, the basin, the curtain, the mesh screen, came to under $15 total, most of it a one-time cost using things I already owned. Compare that to what a single window air conditioning unit runs, $200 to $500 just to buy, plus another $30 to $50 a month in electricity during peak summer. Households running full central air often report $2,000 to $4,000 a summer, specifically tied to those peak afternoon hours. The exact hours every one of these 6 tricks is designed to fight back against. I'm not saying $15 replaces a home cooling system. I'm saying it can take a real, measurable bite out of the hours your system works hardest, and that bite adds up to real money by the end of the season. Looking back now, I finally understand what my grandparents were teaching me all those summers. They weren't fighting nature. They were working with it. Every one of these 6 techniques uses the same simple idea. Stop heat before it becomes a problem instead of paying a machine to remove it afterward. None of them will replace an air conditioner during every heat wave, especially in humid climates. But together they can make your home noticeably cooler, reduce how hard your AC has to work, and save real money every single summer using principles that have already survived for nearly 2,000 years. So here's what I'd love to know. Which Roman trick surprised you the most? Try one this week. Measure the temperature before and after, and tell us your results in the comments. Different climates produce different numbers, and every experiment helps all of us learn. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten ideas that modern life quietly left behind, subscribe, because next time we're testing another incredible ancient cooling system that supposedly kept entire buildings comfortable using nothing but wind, water, and clever design. After what I discovered here, I'm done underestimating the Romans. Until next time, stay curious and stay cool.